Hey guys, evening everybody. There's an old saying that 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard Devy show with maybe the best 2 of the 3 team. Evening, Jack.
Evening, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, very well. So on tonight's show, we want to take a look back and reflect on some of the takeaways from our last show, our 3-round Devy mock draft startup. So if you've not seen that one, go back, check it out, come back to us on the recording, in your own time. It'll definitely make tonight make a lot more sense. But what we really want to do is we want to dig into kind of how the kind of various teams were constructed, reflect on some of the more spicy picks according to our followers out there on X, and then look at the names of some of the players who missed the cut. We'll kind of dig into those guys a bit deeper. Just talk some players, talk some ball, and kind of give you a little insight into what we were thinking as we went through that mock. But before we do, Jack, how's your week been?
Yeah, good, thanks. March is a busy month in our household. Lots of birthdays, Mother's Day. So it's my son's birthday today. So that's been a lot of fun. He turned 2, and then tomorrow is my mum's birthday. So I'm really pinching the pennies this week to afford presents and things like that. But yeah, I'm doing well.
Good man. Yeah, man. It's always busy, isn't it? With, like George said the other week, all of us have got young kids, and we find ourselves chasing around. I've had a little one come home poorly from school today. So I've done an evening of dealing with sick. He's in bed now. I can actually just finally step back a little bit and relax and talk some football. So look, I figured if we're going to talk our mock draft for people who've not seen it, it might make sense to bring it up here. Okay. So just really quickly, I thought we'd start off, Jack. Obviously, we took it for people that miss a show in alternate slots. I drafted the odds, you drafted evens. We built a 3-round lineup for 6 different teams, so to speak. Obviously, you get torn between that idea of best player available and sticking to your rankings. And then actually, one of the things we wanted to try and do was teach people about like ways they can target certain builds. Now, looking back at our draft board, my immediate thought is there are definitely several slots where I can see what my target was. I know what I was thinking at the time. Others, I look back and think, do you know what? This very much just looks like best player available. So it'd be interesting if we just quickly dip through the lineups. So if I start with a 101, first overall pick, I took Luther Burden, wide receiver from Missouri. In the second round, I took Kevin Concepcion, wide receiver from NC State. And then last round, I took a bit of a dart throw there. I stuck with that wide receiver thing. So that idea of dominating a kind of position group. And I went with Travis Hunter. Big gamble, mercurial talent, but obviously the big gamble from a Devy point of view and an NFL draft point of view is whether he goes on to play corner or receiver in the league. So my mindset on that one, after getting solid guys in the first 2 rounds, I would, in that position group, I was happy to take a dart throw on the talent in the third, because if it comes good, that feels like a real home run pick. 102.
Yeah, the first team that I selected started with Evan Stewart, which we mentioned in the pod is that first 3 receivers. Any of them could be the 101, any of them could be 102, any of them 103. So really happy to get Evan Stewart there. And this team has a 2025 feel. So we talked about there's a strategy where you can try and dominate one position group or one draft class, and this one has 3 2025 players in it. So Evan Stewart at the 102, Isaiah Bond at the 202, and Quinn Ewers at the 302. So these are all players that could end up coming out into the NFL next season. I think Isaiah Bond is probably the only one who's maybe a question mark on that. It depends how high a caliber season he has at Texas this year, but he's definitely got the potential to earn himself some first round draft buzz. So the idea there was to monopolize the 2025 draft class, which sets your team up in a really strong position. And all these players are yeah, they have first round buzz to varying degrees. Now Quinn Ewers, there's question marks on him, but in the third round, I'm quite happy to take, like you said, a dart throw in the third round on a player that has high reputation. He's at a big school, and he does have production in his back pocket. He's not shied away from putting on tape what he needs to for the NFL. He just needs a little bit more.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you've only got to go back a couple of years. And as the number one overall recruit in his class, he was going first round Devy drafts easy. So to pick him up in the third there, knowing that he's a likely NFL quarterback, seems like really good value there. If you move across to the 103, obviously I started off that team by taking Tet McMillan. We had a good conversation on the night about how those top three guys is dealer's choice. As a team at the moment, we're drafting in a 10-round kind of startup mock draft with some of the guys over at Campus to Canton, just to help them with their ADP and their kind of process. And Tet went 101 in that one, and nobody batted an eyelid. So to get him at the 103, or to get any of those guys in any order we said at the time, feels like perfectly good business. This team, as I kind of look back, really looks more like a BPA. Best player available at the time, looking at the rankings. More than happy to take who I consider the top running back in the 2026 class there at the 203 with Justice Haynes. I don't think you're ever going to see him that cheap again. Now would be the time to get him, because Alabama is going to rely on him a lot this year. He's going to put up some big production along with Jan Miller. And yeah, it seems like a really good value pick there more than anything. And then again, in the last one, I know we are skeptical about his prospects, but again, when you look at consensus and what other people are thinking, my recent startup in a brand new Devy League saw Shedeur Sanders go the first QB overall. And again, in this mock startup that we're doing with the Campus to Canton guys at the minute, it was the same picture again. So listen, he's got buzz in the third round. If you don't like him as a prospect, I'm sure you'll be able to sell the name. And he just seemed like a worthwhile dart throw in the third.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Moving on to the 104 team. This is my hype team. That's what the 2024 hype team, because you've got Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State, at the 104, CJ Baxter, running back out of Texas, at the 204, and Nico Iamaleava, pronunciation up for debate, out of Tennessee at the 304. And this is a team of three players that have significant excitement building around them going into the 2024 season. This is legitimately the wide receiver one, the running back one, and the QB one for the draft in 2026, because these guys have super high ceilings and they are at premier programs with the ability to showcase their talent. I absolutely love Carnell Tate. I think he's put on show everything you could want out of a wide receiver in their freshman year at a premier college. I think obviously you can put more on tape, you can put more stats on your scoreboard, but he was playing alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, so he had scraps to feed off and did pretty well. CJ Baxter, the number one running back recruit in the class. I know he's a very close two for you, or well, I'm assuming a very close two for you, behind Justice Haynes in that 2026 class. And Nico has the chance to really not just be the best quarterback in his class, but we're looking at some quarterback classes coming up that we're a little bit down on. And Nico could elevate himself in a system under Josh Heupel that is going to put him front and center on Saturdays. So, really like this class, but it obviously has the potential to backfire because they're such volatile. Well, Carnell Tate maybe aside, it's a volatile draft that I've gone for there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you're right in what you said. There's three big time prospects at big time schools who are certainly showing signs of ascending. And I think that is a really, really solid team. To pick CJ Baxter up in round 2 at the 204 just seems excellent business. Excellent business and makes complete sense. So I'm well on with that one. That kind of team in the 105 slot then, I think the strategy is very clear. We've got 3 running backs, all from the 2025 class. We know the class is strong. We know it's loaded. In Travion Henderson, we take the guy that was probably 2024's RB1 had he chose to come out this year. He's decided to go back to Ohio State. And, as long as he stays injury-free, touch wood for the guy, it's looking like he's going to pick up where he left off towards the tail end of last season. Then we get the Georgia transfer, Trevor Etienne, again, big-time prospect, who is moving into a very good situation as he moves across from Florida to Georgia. And then Devin Neal, another guy who we really thought was going to come out this year. It's almost a given that he'll come out next year because I'm not sure how much eligibility he'll have left. And I have this thing, like when I look back at this is probably my favorite of the of any of the 6 slots that I drafted, because just from a personal hunch, like I tried to do something different in each slot, but this one looks much more like a draft that I'd be really happy with. I don't want to be trading for veteran running backs. I want to draft my running backs and I want them to hit. And then, fingers crossed, that's when I sell. But I don't want to be trading for other running backs because I find myself light. I'd rather trade for quarterbacks and wide receivers. Therefore, if I can land these 3 guys in the same class, people are going to want at least one of them. And I'm sat in a position now where I can make profit on those names, whilst keeping players that are going to bolster and boost my roster.
Absolutely. I think if you're going to monopolize a position group within one draft class, running back is the way to do that, because they are so valuable and less predictable for NFL production. So to get 3 guys, you're really happy if 2 of them hit. I mean, you're pretty content if 1 hits as an NFL starter, aren't you? If 2 out of 3 hit, you're rolling, and if all 3 go to the NFL and establish themselves a role, you're absolutely laughing.
Go on then, Jack. Tell us about that 106 slot.
Yeah, so the 106 slot is more of a best player available situation, I think. Taking Emeka Egbuka at the 106, I love it. I think he's a highly talented prospect, someone who didn't need to come back to school but wants to just go that Chris Olave route, come back to Ohio State, try and boost his draft stock even higher. I think he wants to solidify himself as a guaranteed first rounder, which he probably wasn't in such a strong 2024 NFL draft class. So good move for him and great for Devy, because we already know that he's a really talented NFL receiver. It's just how high he's going to go and what extra he can put on tape this year. I think it's such a safe first round pick at the 106. So really happy with that. Nick Singleton. Now I knew that you weren't, I probably could have let him drop a little bit further, but that's not indicative of every Devy draft that our listeners are going to be a part of. So Nick Singleton, someone who has a lot to prove in 2024. I think his expectation going into college was through the roof, and the traits and the baseline skills that he has, we'd have liked to have seen a bit more production from him and a little bit more growth and development. So there's a reason he's dropped down to the 206 when previously he'd have been a first round lock last season in Devy drafts. So a bit to prove for Nick Singleton, but I still believe in the talent. And then just add a bit of youth in there. We spoke about the new crop of quarterbacks coming into college a few weeks ago, and you sold me on DJ Lagway even more than I already was. And I think if I'm going to take a quarterback, I'm going to take one who is that far away from seeing the field that I can sell him as soon as he does step on the field. So he'll have a year of development at Florida. He's not going to see the field unless Graham Mertz gets injured or it's in mop-up time. And then I'll let the buzz creep up and up and up before he hits the field and then try and sell him. before anything could go too wrong for him.
Yeah, it's a really sensible approach. And, we've already discussed Florida's schedule this year. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of garbage time where they're sat in front. So I do think we're going to see very little of him this year, which is probably the best thing for him, probably the best thing for him and his development, and your prospects of picking him in the third round long term. He actually went significantly higher in that kind of 10-round startup that we're doing at the moment. I was just trying to dig into where it was exactly, and typically I can't see it. His name's just not jumping out on me on that big sheet. But it feels like in the third round there, you've got yourself a steal. I'm fairly sure it was the middle of the second that you went higher than a lot of the kind of 2025 class of quarterbacks. So, yeah, it just tells you what like the kind of wider Devy community is thinking of him as well. So, yeah, a nice pick there to round out the third. In that 107 slot, again, I've taken a slight, a very clear approach. This time it was about wide receivers and it was about dominating that 2026 class. I'll start from the bottom up this time. I know not a lot of people will know that much about Tyler Brown, but doing quite a bit of work on the tape this offseason. I actually have him kind of my 6th/7th, very much interchangeable with a guy who's hardly seen the field, the much maligned Brandon Inniss. But I have them kind of 6 and 7, splitting hairs between them. But then I also have Eugene Wilson as my 4th best receiver in that class, and Zachariah Branch as the 1 overall in that class at the moment, still slightly above Carnell Tate. I'm just waiting for a little bit more in terms of production. But to snag 3 of your kind of top 6 guys in the same class at the same position group, again, just seems like if I want to hold one of those, 2 of those, sell the other, I'm going to be in a prime position to do so come that first round time and come draft season in 2026.
Yeah, looking back on this draft, I can't believe that I don't have any 3 wide receiver builds, because that is how I instinctively like to build my Devy drafts. I think wide receiver is the most reliable, the most predictable position that we have, and rather contrasting to what Phil likes with his running backs. I like to avoid the running backs as much as possible, because I think wide receiver has a bit of strength and reliability in it, where the running back position is a bit more volatile. So I love this build. I think all 3 of those receivers have NFL first round possibilities. It's a great class to grab the wide receivers in. Going on, the team in the 108 slot, we took the first freshman came off the board at 108, and that's Jeremiah Smith, going to Ohio State, already gathering chatter in spring practice, pushing those established Ohio State wide receivers, and that is quite an achievement. So really happy with picking up Jeremiah Smith there. I think I've seen him go higher than this in some mock drafts, and not too much later. He's not going to last too long. So if you want him, I think you're going to have to get him before the 108, if I'm perfectly honest. But I like that pick. And then adding Ryan Williams going to Alabama in the same class. So again, looking at pairing those 2 up, 2 receivers that could be at the top of your NFL draft when they hit the NFL. They've got quite a long time to get there, but that means they've got quite a long time to build their draft stock up as well and build up their Devy value. And then Ollie Gordon at the 308, a running back out of Oklahoma State who is primed for a major year in that offense. They are going to ride him till the cows come home in 2024. And I think that's going to put him on people's draft radars. His stock's going to rise. He's a really strong, fun player to watch. And anyone that can shoulder an entire team's offense is someone that the NFL is going to be interested in. So yeah, I like Ollie Gordon there, someone who's kind of crept up draft boards out of nowhere in the last year.
Yeah, there was, funnily enough, I was reading an article earlier by Max Chadwick, who works with PFF. He's released an article today where he put his top 10 college football running back prospects, regardless of draft year, out today, and he had Ollie Gordon ranked above all the other running backs. That's his number one overall prospect.
Wow.
In terms of the running back position. So that includes your 24 class that we're about to see drafted, the much hyped 2025 class, and the guys that are that played their freshman season in 2026. What it didn't account for was any of the guys coming through in this brand new recruited class. So the new freshmen that are on campus yet to play a snap in terms of college football. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm not super high on that position group. Okay. That doesn't mean I'm right. But right now, I've not seen a great deal to get excited about just yet. So yeah, Ollie Gordon again, like seems like a absolute dynamite pick that late in the game, in the third round. If we move across and have a look at the team drafted in the 109, okay, every team tells a story, and if I'm drafting a Devy side like this, it is because I have built a win now veteran NFL side of my draft. Okay, I've gambled on older prospects that might have 1-2 years left max, and I need some immediacy in terms of replacements. Okay, so I've taken 3 2025 prospects, one at each position. My love for Juice Wells is on record by now. You know what I think of him. I think he's an absolute superstar who's been completely overlooked. Drew Aller is very much in a prove-it year. I love the way you phrased that in one of our conversations this week, Jack. He is in a prove-it year. There are doubters there, but he still has the name, the pedigree, and the stock. Whereby you could get out on him with a more casual player in your league if things don't quite go to plan early this season. And Katron Allen, his running mate at Penn State, probably not as hyped and well known as Nick Singleton. This raised eyebrows in terms of the value and the position. This is very much trusting the tape and trusting the player. I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But yeah, Katron Allen is going to give your fantasy team an immediate boost next year in 2025. And I love the tip, so I was quite happy to have him there as well. 110?
110, I mean, you've just described Katron Allen, and at 110, Quinshon Judkins is a very similar prospect. Someone the tape tells you everything you need to know. He is a strong, smooth, fluid runner who is going to enter the NFL draft next year, and he's going to immediately improve your fantasy team. So this team is based on the idea that I have drafted my quarterbacks strongly in the NFL side, sacrificing running back, because that is really what you have to do if you want to build up a team with strong quarterbacks. You've got to sacrifice a position, and what I would do is sacrifice running backs there, pick up a strong immediate or near immediate boost to your running back room in a 2025 Quinshon Judkins. And then because I've got those strong established quarterbacks, maybe Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, although actually this might not be the year where you can get both of them in the same draft, but Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray, that, there's a possibility you get those two. That allows you to then swing for the fences on other quarterbacks in Devy. And so Arch Manning is the name, and his stock is going to be so high, and it's going to be shouted from the rooftops that he is the next coming of his dad and uncle. So I think his value is only going to increase, and the talent might be there. We haven't seen anything really from him yet. I personally don't think he's going to be quite. I don't think he's going to be the number one quarterback in his class, but he could prove me wrong. And Jackson Arnold again is someone who we've not seen loads from, but the hype is building for this year. He's a dual threat. He's a strong, tough runner. He's got a cannon of an arm. I think if you're going to take punts on quarterbacks, these are the two kind of players that I want to take punts on. They could be absolute boom players for you in the NFL.
Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? Like the way you've just described Arch there, as we were picking for this mock, this 10-round mock that we're in at the moment, we chose Arch in the 3rd round of that for exactly the same reason. The idea that the second he steps on the green bit, his value again is going to skyrocket. He's already got the name factor and the name brand. The second he sees the green bit and starts throwing the ball around, it only has to be safe for people to probably go out of their minds. And again, if I'm looking to profit, if I've got 2 solid quarterbacks, like you say, in a situation where I've got a Dak and a Kyler, say, or a Hertz and a Kyler, like you mentioned, what's to say that I don't keep Jackson Arnold and sell Arch for an absolute premium?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is how good teams stay good. Okay. Moving into the 111, I took the first quarterback off the board at that point at the 111. It hadn't really been the plan, but it just seemed to be screaming value. I like Carson Beck. I discussed it last week. He is, I think, a lot better than people were expecting. I think he, in a class where people are starting to doubt what the QB1 looks like in 2025, I think he's in a prime position to take benefit of that and take the advantage of that. Moving down to Marion Hampton, I think there are a raft of running backs that are going to, really compensate for the fact in your dynasty drafts that this year was a down year for that position. And Marion Hampton could be relied on heavily next year at UNC, especially given the fact that they're obviously moving on and Drake May is joining the league. There's the real chance that he becomes a real bell cow and the kind of water carrier for that team. And then last but not least, Dylan Raiola. Again, highly hyped, highly talented freshman recruit. People will know him by name already. I was in a couple of drafts last year where people were starting to say, but he's on campus, but he's declared, he's can we have him? And, that's before he still had high school ball left to play. So I am quite convinced that, again, he's gone to Nebraska. He stands a fairly decent chance of playing almost immediately, unlike some of the other 2027 guys. And he's in a good position to build his stock and his profile. And if he does that, depending on what my situation is, if Carson Beck goes to the league and adds value and looks like he's going to be a player, well, then I can hold Beck and look to maybe sell on from Raiola.
Yeah, I like the way that this team just increases in risk-reward value round by round. I think Carson Beck is a safer quarterback prospect. I'm not super sold on him, but he does have the key traits. And he, as you say, he has shown a lot more than we expected in his starts at Georgia. Then Amarian Hampton, he has the build of an NFL running back already. He is a tank and someone that you can rely on with the ball. He's got really safe hands. He's not asked to catch loads out of the backfield at the moment, but that, like you say, he's going to be the center point for that UNC offense. Could change quite a bit. And then Dylan Raiola is the face of Nebraska's new era and getting back to their glory days. If that continues, his Devy value is going to be sky high, whether he is good enough to make it onto your fantasy roster or whether you're going to trade him beforehand. That's up to you. The final team, pick 112. I took Micah Hudson, and we'll dive a bit deeper into him later. So I'll kind of leave him for now, but he's someone that I really like as a freshman prospect coming into Texas Tech. At the 212, Connor Weigman has the chance to be the number 1 quarterback in next year's NFL draft class. He's consistent, but equally consistent with getting injured at the end of each season. So there's some concerns there maybe, but to get the potential number 1 quarterback in the class at the 212 is an absolute bargain as far as I'm concerned, and was definitely best player available at that stage. There's no one in that 3rd round that I look back on and think, I should have taken them before Weigman. So I'm quite happy with that. And Jonte Cook is another prove it player, someone who I absolutely loved coming into college, going into Texas, I think he's got the talent and the build to take over as the wide receiver one. The problem that we've got is he's going to have to fight off a million other wide receivers for Quinn Ewer's attention. But we'll see what happens there. That's at the 312. That's a solid prospect with a questionable situation. And with today's college landscape, anything could happen. Like we could see Jonte Cook transfer out and go to a much better landing spot for fantasy production.
Without a doubt. Okay, so that kind of gives you an overview of kind of our thought processes we were building. There are different strategies that you can employ, different ways you can go. Obviously, on the back of it, I shared the draft board on X with all our followers on there on social media. I asked you to shout out and tell us, what you thought, what picks you liked, where you thought we reached. Was there any kind of spiciness in there? And a couple of questions were asked. So that's where we're going to start, okay? And we're going to start with defending your spicy pick, okay? So NB069, Jack, reached out with a question for you, saying, super curious about the Micah Hudson pick before Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams from the 2024 high school wide receiver class. And he asked, was there any rationale behind that pick? Now, I've just realized I've got the 1-1 written there when he was the 111 written there when he was the 112. I think will forgive me one slot there. But yeah, could you tell us about Micah Hudson at the 112, perhaps as high as he was selected in terms of the overall value of the pick, but then secondly, why before Ryan Williams and some of the other kind of really hyped incoming high school freshmen?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Micah Hudson and what makes him exciting, because that's the real reason that I think he's a first round Devy pick. He is exciting. He's got an incredible change of speed. He's someone that reminds me of a winger in rugby, someone who can slow it down to manipulate defenders and make them change their footwork and then explode with the strong burst that Hudson has to take advantage and really put the defenders on their back foot. And mentioning exciting, looking at his tape, you can see some exciting plays on a weekly basis. He was potentially the best playmaker in Texas high school football last year, and that is a high caliber of high school football that he was impressing in. He can win at every level and he's strong at the catch point. I love how he works with the ball in hand. So he is shifty and really dynamic after the catch. And he reminds me a little bit of Garrett Wilson when he's got the ball in his hands. His awareness of where he is on the field and what angles he needs to take and how he can exploit that leverage is something that means he can take any play to the house. Like he can catch the ball a yard past the line of scrimmage and he can take that to the house because he's got such intelligence, such shiftiness and speed. So I really love the traits he has. I love where he's going. He's going to Texas Tech. He's going to be in the Kitley offense, which is a high passing volume offense. He's going to get a lot of the ball, and I think he's going to be on the field very early. There's a few receivers that have transferred out of Texas Tech. Some guys that I took real punts on in my college fantasy football leagues that didn't quite pan out. And Hudson could fit into the slot receiver role at Texas Tech straight away. And that is the number one position that I want to target in college fantasy football, because Zach Kitley targets that slot receiver often and often and often, and he just never stops throwing the ball. So that early production for Devy players really boosts their value. So if he can be the focal point of the Zach Kitley offense, his value is going to increase regardless of the fact that he's at Texas Tech, almost regardless of his actual talent and display on the field. His value is going to increase. But I think he's got all the traits to take over that wide receiver room and dominate. And that's the kind of player that I want to take. I think there's also something to be said about taking a freshman over some of the established players that have a high ceiling, but not quite as high a ceiling as the unknown. The unknown brings with it the possibility of wide receiver one ceiling, if that makes sense. And I think Hudson has that. I think he can show that. And I don't think there's really any way he can damage his reputation at Texas Tech, because he's going to be on the field early and he's going to get a lot of volume.
No, I think that's an argument really well made, pal. He's when you look, obviously, I put the threads together on X, looking at some of those top 5-star recruits, just kind of around New Year time. And you're right, the highlight plays, the boom plays that are going to get people to sit up and take notice. I'd rather have him on my roster, and again, watch how he progresses, then see him somewhere else. So, sometimes if you want a guy, you've got to kind of ditch ADP and go with your gut and build that team that you want in Devy. And if you want Michael Hudson, more power to you. Okay. Moving on from that, then I put out obviously the Devy board and said, tell us what you think, and immediately shout out to @DevyNerd, Matthew Patterson. He kind of very much backed up your thought process on show night, Jack, and when we recorded this, when I took Katron Allen at the 109. He described it just like you did, as a spicy pick. So I'm going to defend my choice of Katron Allen at the 109. Okay. First of all, this comes down to trust in the tape. When you watch, he has, when I'm watching running backs, what I'm really looking for is elite footwork. He plays with elite footwork, pad level and play strength. And I just love his ability to move behind the line laterally. He really, really does a good job of using his vision. He demonstrates really good vision. He manages to find the right kind of cutback lanes to then really penetrate at speed. At 5'11", 220, he's a good, solid build for the kind of modern day NFL running back. And then you just cannot overlook, right? What we want is we want guys who hit. We want guys who make the league and stay around. And Penn State puts running backs in the league. Okay? I'll take a Penn State rusher every time, given their production. I've long said, it's almost become a running joke that I'm down on Nick Singleton. I'm not necessarily down on Nick Singleton. I just like Katron Allen's tape more. He certainly looks like the better of the two backs in that backfield at the moment. It's really interesting sometimes when you watch him. In order to get them both on the field, it's often that you'll see Nick Singleton lined up as your traditional running back, and they kind of flex Allen out wide, looking to get him involved in the receiving game. Now, it doesn't happen as much as it perhaps should, but it's interesting how many snaps he takes out there. And I think it's because, although it doesn't score you fantasy points, right, there's blocking upside as well there. If you want to get on the field as an NFL running back, you have got to show that you can block in pass pro. And they wouldn't put him out there as much if that wasn't something he was capable of doing. Look, the 109 was maybe high. It's really interesting. Like, no matter how much I tell you I love him, obviously keep referring to this mock draft we're in at the moment, this 10-round mock draft with the guys over at Campus to Canton. We managed to get him at the 405. Once the fourth round came by, I said to you, Jack, I'm not letting him go. This is who we're taking now. I've bided my time. I've waited patiently. I didn't shoot too early, like maybe the suggestion is I did here in the first round. But there was no way I was letting him fall more than that. And listen, I'm adamant he's going to be a great pickup. I'm adamant he's going to be around for a long, long time in terms of your dynasty rosters. Was the 109 pick in our startup high? Yeah, probably. Probably a little bit too high. Because I think we're seeing through ADP, you could probably wait around a round and a half, and still pick him up. And I think my thing there is make sure you go and get Katron Allen. Okay, maybe on reflection, you don't need to grab him at the 109.
Yeah, absolutely. I think is what you say about the role that Katron Allen and Nick Singleton have. I feel like the 1A and 1B have flipped from what we expected them to be. And Katron Allen has taken that 1A role away from Nick Singleton, and they're having to work out ways to get Singleton on the field rather than the other way around, where you have to figure out ways to get Katron Allen on the field. But we're not willing to do that. Well, you are, Phil, but we're not willing to do that in Devy as quickly. And I think maybe we need to be. And we mentioned before we started recording that Devy is so much fun because you can't be chalk all the time. You have the whole point of Devy is investing in what you see on the film, what you see on tape, what translates to the NFL. And so if we all believed that Katron Allen was too high at the 109, then why are we playing Devy? If we're just going to take one person's rankings and go tick, 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 that one, then that one, then that one, then we've got nothing to talk about. We can stop the podcast because, yeah.
Absolutely. And the idea is rankings, by their very nature, are often fluid. They're not set in stone. There's going to be an awful lot to happen this year. Like there's guys I'm super high on that in a 3-round Devy mock probably came nowhere near. I mean, I'm going to read out a list of some key omissions shortly, but then there's guys whose situations have changed just in recent days. All of a sudden, Mark Fletcher at Miami looks like, as a 2020 class of 2026 back, he looks like he's into an amazing situation now where he's really got the potential to take on and be the lead guy, right? There's nothing to say that this time in 2 months' time, we're not looking at him as a potential number one Devy back. Like, I don't think that would be out of the realms of possibility. And, I just think it's so fluid. You're right. Like, if we all had exactly the same opinion, then the draft is never going to change, and it kind of beats the entire purpose. I would be delighted with any roster where I can end up with Katron Allen. Boxing savvy and boxing clever, hang fire, because you'll probably pick him up a little bit later than the 109. But sometimes you just got to get excited and get your guy, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay. If we shuffle on, okay. One of the things I put out there was I sat and looked at this draft board as I was putting it together while the wife was asleep on the sofa. I had my laptop and clicking away, and it hit me in a 3-round Devy draft. Like we've built and we've kind of taken you through, taken the listeners through the kind of tactics of behind each build, and inevitably in 3 rounds, some guys will get left out. That when you look back, you go, how the hell did we miss that guy? Like, what were we thinking? Could we not have found a place for him here? And I tweeted out, posted out. Is it still a tweet? I don't know. We tweeted out kind of some of the notable positions and players that you wouldn't see in our draft that you will see in a lot of others. And some of the names I highlighted: Antonio Williams at Clemson, Barry and Brown from Kentucky, Damian Martinez, running back from Oregon State. Raheem Sanders will be in on pretty much every Devy roster you can imagine. He's just moved to South Carolina from Arkansas. Ashton Ginty, running back at Boise State. And then Dante Moore, big-time QB prospect who's moved to Oregon. He'll be behind Dylan Gabriel right now, but he's moving into a great situation with a great passing offense. And he was a high recruit. And it just begs the question, like, who, in your opinion, Jack, was the key omission?
I think all the guys that you listed there are tough omissions. That Dante Moore pick in particular, because he's someone who has shown some production, as he was the starter for a year before transferring to Oregon. and he's still got that pedigree. And I'm someone who really values that on-field production as a Devy player. So he was in contention, but the guy I've gone for is Antonio Williams, someone who I absolutely loved coming out of high school. And I thought the landing spot at Clemson was excellent. And he's just slid down Devy draft boards since his freshman year. But that freshman year, we have forgotten like that in the Devy community, because he managed to rack up over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns as a freshman at Clemson, when Clemson were at the peak of college football. Like, the last 2 years haven't been as kind to Clemson, as they've lost a bit of talent, and there's some question marks around the coaching tree and that kind of thing. But Antonio Williams is someone who I loved the talent, and I think he is such an NFL style receiver, someone that is going to be utilized in so many ways on Sundays if he can stay healthy. And the big problem is he had only 5 games last season. Is that right? He had a toe injury. He had an ankle injury. It didn't quite click in those 5 games with Cade Klubnik, and Cade Klubnik didn't really click with anybody. So we'll see what happens with Clemson. But Antonio Williams, I guess it's an omission because I love the talent, but not really that undeserved. He has fallen down for a reason, but I think he is someone who is he's a very smart, crisp route runner. He's got a really good release off the line, and he just screams NFL receiver to me. And if he can recapture that form and stay injury free, and form that connection with Klubnik or whoever's going to be quarterback, it's going to be Klubnik, right? Then I think he can make his way back up there, and that's why he'd be an omission. He's someone who we could be kicking ourselves over omitting from this draft, but it's not unfair that he's dropped out of it.
I think that's right. In any draft, in any startup draft, in any draft full stop, there will always be an element of recency bias and what have you done for me lately? And the fact of the matter is, Antonio Williams hasn't, in spite of his talent, proven to be the most reliable because of kind of it's not even like he's had one big, horrible, serious injury. It's the persistent kind of low level niggling injuries. 2 to 3 weeks here, 2 to 3 weeks there with something different. That's really kind of holding him back from showing exactly what he can be about. But you're right, the talent is unquestioned, and I seriously hope that he's working his way back to a degree of fitness this off season in spring camps, so that in the fall he hits the ground running and kind of reminds us kind of just what he can do. So going back then to that list of names, there was one that stood out for me. And when you get feedback in any form, on something you're doing, it's brilliant to see that our work's getting out there and being seen. So I was absolutely buzzing when the big guy himself, Brandon Lejeune, at Devy Deep Dive, for those of you that don't know him, he's one of the followers in the Devy community. He's got an excellent kind of podcast that's out there. Messaged straight away and said, yeah, one key omission. How did you miss Ashton Ginty, running back from Boise State? And I looked back at the draft board and went, yeah, how did we? How did we? So I'd just like to spend a couple of moments talking a little bit about Ashton Ginty. Kind of burst onto the scene at Boise in 2022 as a true freshman. He racked up 821 yards on 156 carries and 7 TDs. He rated and ranked as the highest graded true freshman in all PFF metrics, with an overall grade of 89.5 in his freshman year. And not to be outdone, he came back last season and blew the doors off that. He, in terms of the PFF metrics, and just his overall production. His stat line for last year was bonkers. 220 carries, 1,347 yards, and 14 TDs on the ground. He is an absolute weapon in the receiving game, where he also rocked up 43 receptions for 570 yards and another 5 touchdowns. 6.1 yards per carry. And the only way I can describe Ashton Ginty is he is explosive. He's got incredibly impressive contact balance and strength, given his kind of smaller, more wiry kind of frame. He's only 5'9", sub 200 pounds. And, you know, watching him bounce off people in the style of a bigger back is brilliant to see. Excellent agility and acceleration, and real impressive short area quickness to change direction and then just leave people for dead. Interestingly, and, you know, perhaps the one knock right now is that he is in the group of 5. He's not at a Power 5 school. So you could make the argument that he's playing against lesser talent. But last year, he led college football in forced missed tackles with 82. Would that change if he was playing against SEC opponents? Who knows? All right. Or Big Ten opponents? Perhaps, possibly. But, you know, ultimately what he's putting out there is an incredibly exciting tape. And, yeah, I feel like we should have found space for him. I'm looking at the teams and going, difficult to say where. Maybe in some of those late round dart throws, if we're taking a dart throw on a Shedeur Sanders or a Jackson Arnold, a Jonte Cook, are they the logical places that you slip someone of that talent in, knowing that you're getting a guy that ultimately, given his skill set and his ability in the receiving game, you know, it's a skill set that's translating to the NFL, and we know is certainly valuable for fantasy. Yeah, he's an omission, and I feel pretty bad that it took an absolute legend like Brandon Lejeune to point out that we'd missed him.
Yeah, I think, as our family of podcasts would say, Ashton Ginty is the wild card amongst a Devy draft. I think he's someone who has sky-high potential, but some real question marks. He's got that ability to transform your fantasy team and your Devy squad for sure. And the only question mark is that level of competition, and could he step it up in the NFL? And we're not going to know that until he goes. He's going to stay at Boise State this season. I don't envisage him transferring after spring training, but we have to judge him on what he puts on tape and how he measures up statistically against other players of the position. He's going in a strong running back class. So it'll be really interesting to see how the NFL values him. But he could sprinkle some magic dust on your fantasy team right there.
Absolutely. Again, going back to that article I mentioned earlier when I was doing a little bit of reading, this PFF article by Max Chadwick, in Max's opinion, if you took the 10 best college prospects at running back at the moment, first of all, Ashton Ginty was the only group of 5 player to make the list, but he also made it at number 5. There was only one running back from the current class that he had ranked ahead of him. That was Jonathan Brooks. And he only had him behind Amarian Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, and Ollie Gordon. No sign of Katron Allen or Nick Singleton. So what do we know?
Or Trevion Henderson.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a lot of this will tie into the metrics that running backs put out last year, and obviously uses PFF's numerical services and data services. So there isn't a great deal of tape and numbers that Trevion Henderson perhaps produced. But yeah, he did make the list, but at number 10. I'll ping you it later. You can have a good look through and then see what you think.
Please.
Okay. So In terms of the draft class, or in the mock draft, hopefully we've taken you through. We have left enough time this week to make sure that we take you through our regular feature that in no way at all infringes copyright from a well-known crowdsourced website. We are going to play our game of sell, hold, and acquire. Again, Jack, I'm going to give you the reins and let you go first. Okay. Tell us who you're going to talk about this week.
Yeah, I'm selling somebody that we had a dart throw on in that third round of our mock draft, and that is Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback at Colorado. I would much rather be out too early than stuck holding the trash, especially when it comes to quarterback. I have seen Shedeur Sanders go as the number one quarterback in a Devy draft recently. I think you sent me that image, Phil, and it just made me feel like his value is so high, maybe not too high, like he could live up to that hype, but it's high enough that I am cashing in right now. He's going way earlier than I would ever pick him. So in a Devy startup, I am never owning any Shedeur Sanders stock. So if it is this high, I'm selling him, and I'm very happy to be proved wrong. You're still going to get a good return. The name value is getting you good return already. He's got to come back from a back injury. That's what really concerns me coming into this season. It's not a minor tweak. He's got a back injury to come back from playing quarterback. It's quite an important part of your game and your maneuverability. I think his name value, like you say, is going to hold his value, but it seems to have increased. So I'm cashing out.
It makes complete sense to me. There's a wide range of opinions on the tape that he's putting together at the moment, and when I look at it, there are bits that I like, and there are bits that really lead me to question some of his decision making. And his ability to go through his reads. I think he relies far too much at the moment on his athleticism. And if he shows any lingering effects of that back injury you've just mentioned, he's going to need to change the way he plays and show that he can be a whole lot more. Right now, I'm not sure that I've seen it to warrant the number one overall QB in Devy. Like I say, that's 2 drafts I've been in recently where that's happened. The C2C startup we're in at the moment, and then the big startup I did for a new Devy league that I've joined. He was the number one overall QB each time, and I think there are certainly prospects with higher floors. He may have a high ceiling if everything comes together and everything clicks. But right now they're big ifs, and I think I echo kind of where you're at there. I would be, if that's the range he's going in at the moment, I would be happy to get out and make a profit. Yeah. So that leads me on to mine then. We'll stick with this QB theme. I'm going in the other direction. I am going to acquire Carson Beck from Georgia. We mentioned him when we were discussing Team 111's draft there in our startup. And I said then, I think he's put a lot more on tape than we expected of him. We expected a guy to come in and game manage this excellent defense, not turn the ball over, win games by being safe. And I thought he did a whole lot more than that. Yes, he's only a one-year starter today, but last year he put up 3,941 passing yards with 24 touchdown to 6 interceptions kind of ratio, and played well. He's at 6'4", 215. He's athletic enough, but that's not where he's going to win. He is the kind of prototype pocket passer. And I was just really impressed. Like when you go back and you watch, like, the clean mechanics, the poise, the pocket presence. And I just kind of feel like right now, in a class where the quarterbacks really aren't overly fancied at this moment, he could easily emerge as the actual QB1 from an NFL perspective. and with a floor not dissimilar to, and again, it feels like a dirty name at the moment, but with a floor and a style not too dissimilar from Drake May, like kind of that almost feels like a dirty name in the dynasty community at the moment. People seem really down on him, but if the floor is so high and the skill set is that polished, why? Why? We want a guy that's going to be around on our rosters and playing meaningful ball for a long time. And as far as you kind of acquiring him goes, depending on when you drafted last year, if you drafted earlier in the offseason last year, he was very much locked in a battle to win the job with Gunnar Stockton. And, if you drafted before that was announced, he might still be sitting undrafted. He might still be sat there waiting for you in this year's supplemental draft to pick him up. And if he is, I would be looking at trading up to the middle of the first, depending on what's available. Particularly if you're 2 or 3 years into your league and, all these names that we've just seen in our startup have gone. I would be moving up those draft boards to see if I can get him before he's gone, and you're going to have to pay a premium to get him, because I genuinely feel like if he starts to generate some traction with Georgia again this year, the price is going to go wild. I'd even go as far as to say that if he's not picked up, if he is picked up and he's sat on someone else's roster in a deeper league, now would be the time to send out some feelers, because if you like him and he gets that NFL draft capital, he's going to be a lot more expensive to acquire further down the line than he is right now.
Absolutely. I think he's someone who played with a really surprising level of maturity, and it felt like he was super experienced last year. And that's partly, I'm sure, the Kirby Smart offense and the fact they had Brock Bowers as his safety blanket, the best safety blanket in all of college football. But he showed significant progression in terms of his development in just 1 year of starting. I think without Brock Bowers, he's going to shoulder more of the offense. I think this could be a rocket up season for Carson Beck. Now, I'm not convinced. I'm not 100% in on the NFL upside. But if he is valued by the NFL, he is someone who's going to be on a roster for a long time. He's got the skills and the maturity and the size to be a pocket passer in the NFL for 6, 7, 8, 9 plus years. Like, the ceiling is huge, and you're getting him now at nowhere near the price that you've got to pay for that in the NFL. Like trying to acquire Trevor Lawrence, that kind of style of quarterback on your fantasy team now is going to cost you at least 2 first-round picks in a super flex. You're not going to have to pay that to get Carson Beck.
You're dead right. Like that would still be the price for Lawrence, even after a downturn in production after his kind of sophomore year. People were hoping he was going to step up again. Didn't quite happen, but you could still realistically expect that price. So to get Beck at an absolute fraction of that, just to me right now, makes too much sense to at least go and knock on doors and inquire.
Mm-hmm. And something I was going to say earlier, you'd much rather trade away something and fail on players that you have watched the tape on and you feel confident in, than trade away your assets for someone that somebody else has told you is the number one recruit or something like that. Like, if you go too chalk with rankings and you invest too much in who somebody else tells you to go and get, you're going to regret it way more than trusting your gut and going after the player that you've seen the tape on. So everybody sell all your shares of Carson Beck and not Amarian Hampton, Katron Allen. Although Amarian Hampton, I'm sure Phil will take them too. Sell them all to Phil. Sell them all to Phil.
Absolutely. Right. Listen, Jack, before we go, all right, ever so conscious of your time. There was one question that was asked on X on the back of our mock draft that I didn't pick up on with you earlier. So really quickly, 30-second shout out. Okay, I'll bring the draft board back up for the people. I would like to know your favorite value pick.
Oh, this one's easy because Justice Haynes should not last till the 203 in a Devy startup draft. I think that was an excellent value pick. Someone who realistically is a top 8 pick in a lot of Devy drafts. Obviously, the quarterback value changes that in Superflex or not Superflex, but he's such a smooth runner. He's got the ability to make really quick, decisive cuts and leave defenders grasping literally at thin air as he's got out of the tight windows. He's got the chance to win the number 1 running back role at Alabama, which is a very nice tick on the resume for NFL teams. And he's also got the physique to add a bit more weight, but also not lose that athleticism. So I think he's going to be a receiving threat and a PPR gold mine. There's my 30 seconds.
Excellent. Listen, for me, I am going to surprise everybody by going Nick Singleton. He lasted until the 206. There's this common theory right now that I'm down on him and it's becoming a bit of an in-jerk. Listen, everyone has a slot where their value becomes a really, really good value. And for me right there, yes, you capitalize on the fact that I perhaps wouldn't pick him over some of the others, but that represents fantastic value. And the truth is, there's nothing to say that although he's probably dropped out of first round contention, he's still very much going around the top of the second. It just so happened that we picked a couple of guys from 2026 ahead of the more immediate kind of prospect of 2025. Listen, he is a good back. He will go to the NFL. I think my kind of big thing was just damp the brakes on announcing him the next Bijan. Which has been relatively proven correct. I've got no doubt he will go to the league, and I think in terms of a startup, if you can snag him in the middle of the second, you have absolutely stolen a pick. So, yeah, well done on nailing that one, Jack.
Cheers. Nick Singleton jersey coming your way at the end of the season.
Okay, yeah, sure. Deal. Listen, we've taken you through a recap of our mock draft. We hope you've kind of enjoyed listening to the theory behind the team builds, how we kind of targeted the different things for different slots. We've taken you through, we've defended our spicy picks, and also kind of given a big up to a couple of key omissions. There's one more big up to do before we go, Jack, all right? He's not with us tonight, and I made fun of him at the start. But, George, I hope you're well, mate. Okay. And we will see you very soon, I'm sure. Okay.
Hope you can see us too, George.
Absolutely. Yeah. We hope you can see us. All right, mate. Right. Jack, it's been an absolute blast. Same time in a fortnight?
Absolutely. See you then.
Sweet. All right, man. Take care. Bye-bye.